When someone talks about the US having no official president for a day, it sounds like something out of a wild movie. It makes you picture chaos, a country leaderless, maybe even someone trying to sneak into the Oval Office. But the reality is much less dramatic than that. It's more about how the rules work, how traditions sometimes bump into legal specifics, and what it truly means for someone to be the president. The idea itself points to a moment, a very specific moment in time, when things might have been in a bit of a gray area. It wasn't a whole 24 hours of nobody being in charge. It was much, much shorter. And it sparked a lot of talk, especially among legal minds and people who really care about the details of how the government runs. It forces you to think about what makes a president, well, a president. Is it the election results? Is it the start of their term? Or is it the moment they say a few very important words? This whole discussion usually comes up around specific inauguration days. Most famously, it happened in 1981 when Ronald Reagan was coming into office. And it wasn't because of a mistake or some kind of emergency. It was because of a simple choice, a personal preference, that then made people think hard about the exact timing of power shifting from one person to another. The system for transferring power in the United States is meant to be very strong. It's designed to avoid gaps. It's supposed to be smooth, almost automatic. When a president's term ends, another's begins. It's meant to be like clockwork. But sometimes, when you look very, very closely at the clock, you find tiny little spaces between the ticks. And that's what this no president for a day idea is all about. It's about those tiny spaces. It's about understanding the difference between when someone legally becomes president and when they formally swear an oath to do the job. And yes, those two things can happen at slightly different times. This whole conversation is about that difference and what it might mean. And it's a good thing to think about. It shows how much thought has gone into making sure the country always has a leader, but also how sometimes, even with all that planning, a small detail can make people wonder. It's not a flaw in the system, really. It's more like a subtle ripple in a very deep and important pond. It just goes to show you that even the most solid foundations can have interesting quirks if you look close enough. It's a tale of timing, tradition, and the letter of the law. Imagine a country, any country, needing a leader. The United States has a very clear way this works. Every 4 years, a new president is chosen, or the old one stays. This changeover, or inauguration, is a really big deal. It's not just a party, it's when power officially moves from one person to another. This is set down in the Constitution, the country's main rulebook. The 20th Amendment to the Constitution is key here. It says that the terms of the president and vice president end at noon on January 20th. And the terms of their successors begin right at that same moment. So at 12:00 p.m. on January 20th, a switch flips. The old president is out, the new president is in. It sounds very neat, right? Like a perfect handoff. But there's another part to being president, and that's the oath of office. The Constitution says the president must take an oath or affirmation before they enter on the execution of their office. This oath is a promise, a solemn vow to uphold and protect the Constitution. It's not just a formality. It's a really important public act. It's the new president saying, I accept this huge responsibility and I promise to do it right. So, we have two things happening. First, the term officially starts at noon on January 20th. Second, the new president needs to take an oath. What if these two things don't happen at the exact same second? This is where the idea of a gap comes from. It's not a gap in the term of the president. It's a potential gap in the swearing in of the president. Most people assume the new president takes the oath right at noon, or very, very close to it. And usually that's what happens. There's a big ceremony, flags waving, speeches, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court administers the oath. It's a public display of the peaceful transfer of power, something the U.S. is very proud of. But let's think about the specific event in 1981. This wasn't about the country not having a president for days. It was about a very short period, minutes, maybe an hour or two. The question was if the new president's term officially begins at noon, but they haven't said the words of the oath yet, are they truly the president in every sense? Can they make decisions? Can they command the military? It really gets down to a deep legal point. Does taking the oath make you president? Or does it just allow you to do the job of president? Most legal experts would say the term starts at noon, no matter what. The person becomes president at that precise moment. The oath is a requirement to then exercise the powers of that office. It's a prerequisite for acting, not for being. So, the new person is president at noon, but they can't actually sign a bill or order the military until they say the oath. This creates a very brief window, and it's a window that people who like to dig into the details have talked about for a long time. It's a fascinating corner of constitutional law and tradition. It's not chaos, not a country without a leader. It's more of a very technical discussion about the exact timing of a legal and ceremonial act. And that specific technical discussion is what led to the no official president for a day talk. Okay, let's zoom in on January 20th, 1981. This was the day Ronald Reagan was supposed to take over from Jimmy Carter. Like every 4 years, it was a day of transition. Carter was leaving, Reagan was coming in. The whole country was watching. The tradition is pretty clear for Inauguration Day. The big ceremony, with lots of people watching, happens around noon on the east front of the Capitol building. This is where the president-elect usually takes the oath of office, right when the clock strikes 12, or just after. It's a very public show of democracy, but 1981 was a bit different. Ronald Reagan made a personal choice. He decided he wanted to take the oath privately first. He wanted a quiet moment with his family, away from the huge crowds and the cameras before the big public event. It was a simple personal desire, and it led to a very interesting situation. So, on that day, Ronald Reagan took the oath of office in a private ceremony. This happened at 11:57 a.m. inside the Capitol building, just 3 minutes before noon. It was a small group, very intimate. He said the words, swore the oath. Now think about what this means. His term officially started at noon. He took the oath at 11:57 a.m. So, when did he become president? Was he president at 11:57 a.m. when he took the oath, or did he become president at 12 p.m. when his term officially began? This is where the confusion or the gap talk comes from. If his term didn't officially start until noon, but he took the oath 3 minutes before noon, what was he in those 3 minutes? Was he president, but just waiting for his term to officially begin, or was he not president, even though he had already said the oath? It gets a bit like a riddle. And then there was the public ceremony. After the private oath, Reagan went outside and took the oath again at the public ceremony. This happened around 12:05 p.m. or so he took the oath twice on the same day. Once privately before noon, and once publicly after noon. This created a specific set of questions. The outgoing president, Jimmy Carter, was still officially president until noon. And the incoming president, Ronald Reagan, had taken the oath before noon, but his term didn't start until noon. So, for those few minutes between 11:57 a.m. and 12 p.m., what was the situation? And for the few minutes after noon, until he took the public oath, what was the situation then? This is the heart of the no official president for a day argument. It's not a whole day. It's just a sliver of time, a few minutes on January 20th, 1981. Some argued that because his term didn't start until noon, even taking the oath early didn't make him president yet. And if Carter's term ended at noon, there was a very, very brief moment after Carter was out and before Reagan's term officially began and he could fully exercise the office, where things were in a sort of limbo. It's a really fine point, a very technical one, but it shows how much precision is needed when it comes to the highest office in the land. It's not just a handshake and a wave. It's about specific times, specific words, and very specific rules laid out in the Constitution. The choice Reagan made, a simple personal one, inadvertently shone a spotlight on these very precise timings. This whole no president for a day idea isn't just about the president. The vice president also plays a really big part in this discussion. And the vice president has to take an oath too. It's all connected. Let's stick with January 20th, 1981. George H.W. Bush was the incoming vice president. Like Ronald Reagan, he also needed to take an oath of office. The 20th Amendment says that the terms of the president and vice president end and begin at noon on January 20th. So they're tied together in terms of when their terms officially start. Typically, the vice president-elect takes their oath just before the president-elect during the same public ceremony. This is usually around 11:50 a.m. or so on Inauguration Day. It's part of the same big event. Now, if we think about the situation with Reagan, where his term started at noon, but he took the oath at 11:57 a.m. and then again at 12:05 p.m. What about the vice president? If the vice president takes their oath before noon, are they officially vice president before the president officially becomes president? It gets even more tangled. The big question here is about succession. If for some reason there was no president, the vice president would step in. That's a key part of how the government works to prevent a power vacuum. But what if neither the incoming president nor the incoming vice president has fully completed all the requirements to take office at the precise moment the old administration officially leaves? This creates a very brief legal limbo. Let's trace it out. 1. Outgoing President Carter's term ends at noon. He is no longer president 2. Outgoing Vice President Mondale's term also ends at noon. He is no longer Vice President 3. Incoming President Reagan's term officially begins at noon. But he hadn't taken the public oath yet, which he did at 12:05 p.m. He had taken a private oath earlier, but some argue that a private oath, especially before the term officially begins, isn't enough to let him execute the office. So, for a very short window, potentially from noon until Reagan took his public oath around 12:05 p.m., some might argue there was a moment where the old administration was out, and the new administration hadn't fully entered on the execution of their office by completing the public oath. The question then becomes, if the president can't exercise the office yet because of the oath timing, and the vice president also can't exercise their office for the same reason, is there anyone officially in charge during those few minutes? Who could respond to an emergency, who could make a critical decision if one was needed right at that moment? This is where the legal gray area truly exists. It's not a gap in who is the president-elect. Reagan was clearly that, but a gap in who can actually do the job of president. The Constitution requires the oath. If the oath hasn't been taken, can the person actually perform presidential duties? Some legal scholars would say no, not until the oath is complete. This kind of discussion highlights how much the country relies on the smooth, precise, and often ceremonial transfer of power. Every minute matters. Even though the chances of a national emergency striking in that exact 5-minute window are incredibly small, the theoretical possibility is enough to make people debate it. It's about making sure there's absolutely no question about who is in charge at every single moment. And this specific situation in 1981 with the early private oath really brought that question into sharp focus for a brief period of that day. So, was there truly no president for a brief time on January 20th, 1981? The short answer from most constitutional experts is no, not really. It's more of a legal technicality than a real dangerous gap in leadership. Here's why. The prevailing legal interpretation, the one most scholars and government officials agree with, is that a person becomes president the very instant their term officially begins. That means Ronald Reagan became president at 12:00 p.m. on January 20th, 1981, no matter what. His election results were certified, his term was set to begin, and that's it. He was president. The oath of office, while absolutely required by the Constitution, is not what makes someone president. Instead, it's a condition for them to exercise the powers of the office. Think of it like getting your driver's license. You might own a car, but you can't legally drive it until you've passed the test and gotten the physical license. You are the owner, but you can't perform the act of driving. Similarly, Reagan was the president, but he couldn't perform presidential duties until he took the oath. So, even though he took a private oath at 11:57 a.m. and then a public oath at 12:05 p.m., he was still the president from noon onwards. The delay in the public oath didn't mean the country was leaderless. It just meant he hadn't yet completed the formal step that allowed him to actively govern. This understanding is really important for continuity of government. The system is designed to avoid any power vacuum. If the presidency somehow depended solely on the timing of an oath, a missed word, a slight delay, or even a sudden illness right before the ceremony could theoretically throw the country into chaos. But the Constitution is smarter than that. It ensures that the office itself is always filled. Let's think about the practical side too. What if an emergency happened at 12:01 p.m. on Inauguration Day? Would the military or government agencies just stop functioning? Of course not. The mechanisms of government are far too robust for that. Even in those few minutes, the outgoing administration would likely still be on high alert until the new administration was fully settled. And the incoming president, even without the oath, would likely be seen as the person in charge, ready to take the oath at the earliest possible moment if an emergency required immediate action. The idea of no president for a day usually comes from a very literal reading of the Constitution. Before he enter on the execution of his office, he shall take the following oath or affirmation. Some interpret execution of his office to mean any official act, suggesting that if no oath has been taken, no one can execute the office, thus creating a momentary void. But the broader view, which most experts support, sees the transition as automatic. The term starts, the person is president. The oath enables them to act as president. It's a subtle but crucial difference. So, while it's an interesting thought experiment and a point for legal debates, the U.S. has never truly been without a president. The system has built-in safeguards, even if one specific inauguration day had a unique timing quirk. It's a testament to the strength and foresight built into the country's foundational documents. The whole discussion about a gap in the presidency, even for a few minutes, makes you think about how important the smooth transfer of power really is. It shows that even tiny details can spark big questions about how the government works. But this specific situation in 1981 was very different from other times when presidential continuity was a real worry. Throughout U.S. history, there have been much more serious moments when the country faced a potential leadership crisis. Think about assassinations, when Abraham Lincoln was killed, or James Garfield, or William McKinley, or John F. Kennedy. In those terrible moments, the vice president immediately stepped into office. There was no question of a gap. The system worked, sometimes with incredible speed, to ensure the country always had a leader. Then there were times when presidents became very ill. Woodrow Wilson suffered a stroke and was incapacitated for months. Dwight D. Eisenhower had a heart attack and other health issues. These situations weren't about a ceremonial timing. They were about a president being unable to do their job. This led to the creation of the 25th Amendment, adopted in 1967. This amendment specifically addresses how a president can transfer power temporarily if they are disabled, and how a vice president can be replaced if the office becomes empty. It's a very clear plan for real crises, much more significant than a few minutes around an oath. The No President for a Day talk, centered around the 1981 inauguration, isn't about any of those kinds of genuine crises. It wasn't about an assassination, an illness, or a sudden unexpected event. It was about a deliberate choice by the incoming president to take an oath privately, slightly before the public ceremony, which then bumped up against the official start time of his term. It was a planned, peaceful, and fully known sequence of events. The system is designed to be incredibly robust. It's built to prevent a vacuum of power. Every president, from the very beginning, understood the gravity of the office and the need for a clear line of succession. That's why the 20th Amendment sets the exact time for terms to end and begin. That's why the oath is a constitutional requirement. Even if there's a few minutes of legal ambiguity, like the one discussed around Reagan's inauguration, the outgoing administration doesn't just vanish at noon. They are still functional until the very last second. And the incoming administration is fully ready to take over, with all the necessary security and support in place. The machinery of government doesn't just grind to a halt because an oath is taken a few minutes early or late. So, when people talk about the U.S. having no official president for a day, it's really more of a semantic debate. It's a very specific, almost academic discussion about the precise moment the office is officially occupied versus the precise moment its powers can be formally exercised. It's not a real-world problem that put the country at risk. The truth is, the U.S. system of government is one of the most stable in the world. The peaceful transfer of power is a hallmark of its democracy, and while these deep dives into the technicalities of the Constitution are interesting and important for legal scholars, they don't mean the country was ever truly leaderless. The notion of no president for a day is an interesting thought, but it doesn't reflect the enduring strength and continuity of the American presidency. The country always has a president, even if the exact moment of formal investiture causes a few minutes of head-scratching.